In the dimly lit corridors of a small, lesser-known university research lab, something extraordinary was about to unfold. The air buzzed with anticipation as Dr. Elena Carter and her team of scientists gathered around a table cluttered with blueprints, wires, and cutting-edge gadgets. Their faces were a mix of excitement and nervousness, their eyes reflecting both hope and uncertainty. This wasn't just another routine experiment. It was an audacious attempt to explore one of humanity's oldest mysteries: what happens after we die. Dr. Elena Carter, a brilliant yet unconventional scientist in her mid-40s, had always been fascinated by the unknown. Her career had been marked by bold ideas, some celebrated and others dismissed as too outlandish. But this time, she felt certain that her team was on the verge of uncovering something groundbreaking. For years, people all over the world had reported strange experiences during near-death moments, visions of bright lights, tunnels, or even encounters with loved ones who had passed away. These stories intrigued scientists but were often dismissed as mere hallucinations caused by stress or lack of oxygen. However, Elena believed there might be more to these accounts than met the eye. The idea for the experiment came to her late one night while reading through old case studies of near-death experiences. She wondered if it was possible to capture evidence of what occurred after death, not through medical tests or brain scans, but directly at the moment when life ended. It was a wild thought, almost impossible to execute, but Elena couldn't shake it off. After weeks of brainstorming with her team, they landed on a plan so daring it bordered on reckless, placing a hidden camera inside a coffin to record what happened during burial. The logistics alone were daunting. They needed advanced technology, capable of surviving extreme conditions underground, airtight casing to protect against moisture, long-lasting batteries to sustain power, and sensitive sensors to detect movement or sound. Every detail mattered, because failure wasn't an option. If this worked, it could redefine how humanity understood death itself. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of the experiment wasn't technical, it was ethical. To carry out such a project, they required someone willing to volunteer, not only their body but also their final resting place as part of the study. Finding the right person would take patience, trust, and above all, compassion. Elena knew that whoever agreed to participate would have to be someone truly special, someone whose motivations went beyond personal gain. Enter Harold Jenkins, a retired schoolteacher in his late 60s. Harold lived a quiet life in a modest apartment, filled with books and memories of students he'd taught over decades. He never married, nor did he have children, leaving him without immediate family to mourn his passing. When diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months earlier, Harold accepted his fate with remarkable grace. Instead of succumbing to despair, he began searching for ways to leave a lasting impact on the world. One day, while flipping through a magazine article about innovative scientific projects, Harold stumbled upon a brief mention of Dr. Carter's work. Intrigued, he reached out to the lab, explaining his interest in contributing to their efforts. At first, Elena hesitated. Approaching someone already facing mortality with such an unusual request seemed insensitive. But Harold insisted, saying, "If my death can help answer questions bigger than myself, then I want to be part of it." Over several meetings, Harold and the team discussed every aspect of the experiment. Elena made sure he fully understood the implications and risks involved. There would be no turning back once the coffin was sealed, yet Harold remained resolute. "I've spent my life teaching kids about curiosity and discovery," he said with a warm smile. "Why stop now?" As preparations continued, the team grew closer to Harold, seeing him not just as a participant but as a friend. His optimism was infectious, lifting spirits whenever doubts crept in. During one particularly tense meeting, Harold joked, "Don't worry, Doc. If there's anything worth seeing beyond this world, make sure you share it with everyone." Though spoken lightly, his words carried weight, reminding everyone why they were doing this in the first place. With Harold's consent secured and the equipment ready, the stage was set for the most ambitious experiment of their careers. Yet, beneath the surface, questions lingered. What would the camera reveal? Would it show nothing, proving skeptics right? Or would it capture something unimaginable, forcing humanity to rethink everything it thought it knew about death. As the team prepared for the funeral service, a mixture of fear and exhilaration gripped them. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was clear. This was uncharted territory, and they were about to step into it together. Every member of the team felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on their shoulders. They weren't just conducting an experiment. They were venturing into the realm of the unknown, driven by a shared desire to understand the greatest mystery of all, what lies beyond the veil of life. And though none of them could predict the outcome, they were united in their determination to find out. Harold Jenkins wasn't just any ordinary man. He was the kind of person who made you feel like the world could be a little brighter, even in its darkest moments. A retired teacher with a gentle demeanor and an infectious laugh, Harold had spent decades shaping young minds in a small-town school. His classroom walls were adorned with colorful posters about science, history, and kindness, reflecting his belief that learning should inspire curiosity and empathy. Though he never sought recognition, his students often spoke fondly of him, years later, crediting him for instilling in them a love for discovery. When Harold received his terminal cancer diagnosis, it came as a shock, not just to him but to everyone who knew him. How could someone so full of life be facing such a grim fate? Yet instead of retreating into despair, Harold chose to embrace his remaining days with purpose. He sold his modest home, donated most of his belongings to charity, and moved into a cozy apartment where he spent hours reading, writing letters to former students, and reflecting on his life. For Harold, death wasn't something to fear. It was simply another chapter waiting to unfold. It was during one of these reflective evenings that Harold stumbled upon the article about Dr. Elena Carter's research. The piece described her unconventional approach to studying near-death experiences and posed questions that resonated deeply with him. Is there more to existence than what we see? Can science bridge the gap between life and death? Intrigued, Harold decided to reach out to the lab. In his email, he introduced himself humbly, explaining his situation and expressing interest in contributing to their work. "If my passing can help shed light on something greater," he wrote, "then I'd consider it a privilege." Elena was hesitant at first. Approaching someone already grappling with mortality felt intrusive, almost exploitative. But Harold's sincerity shone through every word he wrote. And when they finally met in person, his calm demeanor put everyone at ease. Over coffee, Harold shared stories from his teaching days, how he encouraged students to ask big questions, even if they didn't always have answers. "Science is about exploring the unknown," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "Isn't that what you're doing here?" As discussions progressed, Harold demonstrated remarkable clarity and courage. He asked thoughtful questions about the experiment's design, ensuring he understood every detail. Would the camera record continuously, or only under specific conditions? What safeguards were in place to protect his dignity? Most importantly, how would the findings be shared with the public? Elena admired his pragmatism and insisted on transparency throughout the process. Together, they drafted consent forms outlining every aspect of the project, leaving no room for ambiguity. During one particularly poignant conversation, Harold opened up about why he wanted to participate. "I've lived a good life," he said softly, gazing out the window at the autumn, leaves swirling in the wind. "But I've always wondered what comes next. If your experiment can give people some peace or maybe even hope, then it's worth it." His words struck a chord with the entire team. This wasn't just about satisfying scientific curiosity. It was about offering humanity a glimpse into the great beyond. To ensure Harold's comfort, the team involved him in every step of the preparation. They showed him prototypes of the hidden camera system, explaining how it would function underground. They discussed potential risks, like equipment failure or unforeseen technical glitches, and assured him that contingency plans were in place. Despite the complexity of the setup, Harold remained unfazed. "You've thought of everything," he remarked with a chuckle. "I trust you completely." As the weeks passed, Harold became more than just a participant. He became part of the team. He attended meetings, offered suggestions, and even helped troubleshoot minor issues with the equipment. His humor lightened tense moments while his wisdom grounded the group whenever doubts crept in. During one late-night brainstorming session, Harold joked, "If this works, I'll finally get to answer all those questions I couldn't solve in class." Everyone laughed, but beneath the laughter lay a profound truth. Harold's involvement wasn't just about advancing science, it was about fulfilling his lifelong mission to inspire others. The bond between Harold and the researchers deepened as the day of the funeral approached. They weren't just colleagues anymore, they were friends united by a shared purpose. On several occasions, Harold invited the team to his apartment for dinner, cooking hearty meals and sharing anecdotes about his teaching career. One evening, he pulled out an old photo album filled with pictures of smiling students holding handmade projects. "These are the moments that matter," he said, pointing to a picture of a young girl proudly holding up a model volcano. "Not the awards or accolades, but the connections we make along the way." Though Harold faced physical challenges due to his illness, his spirit remained unbroken. On days when fatigue overwhelmed him, he leaned on the team for support, and they reciprocated with unwavering care. Elena often visited him at home, bringing updates on the experiment's progress and listening patiently as he reflected on his journey. "It's funny," Harold mused one afternoon, "but I don't feel afraid anymore. Knowing that my story might help others gives me a sense of peace." As the final preparations neared completion, Harold grew reflective. He penned heartfelt letters to former students thanking them for enriching his life, and recorded video messages for future generations. "Life is short," he said in one of the recordings, "but it's also beautiful. Don't waste it worrying about things you can't control. Focus on the people around you, the moments that bring joy, and the questions that spark wonder." These words echoed in the hearts of everyone who heard them, serving as a reminder of why they embarked on this journey in the first place. On the eve of the funeral, the team gathered in the lab for a quiet moment of reflection. Harold joined them, looking serene despite the gravity of the occasion. "Tomorrow is just another adventure," he said with a reassuring smile. "No matter what happens, I'm grateful to be part of something bigger than myself." As they packed up for the night, each member of the team felt a renewed sense of purpose. Harold's bravery and selflessness had transformed what began as a scientific endeavor into something far more meaningful, a testament to the power of human connection and the enduring quest for understanding. Little did anyone know, Harold's final act of generosity was about to lead them down a path none of them could have imagined. The day of Harold Jenkins' funeral dawned gray and overcast, as if the sky itself was mourning the loss of a kind soul. A light drizzle fell steadily, creating a somber atmosphere that matched the mood of those gathered at the small cemetery on the outskirts of town. The event was intimate, attended by only a handful of people, former students, neighbors, and members of the research team. Though modest in scale, the service carried an air of quiet reverence, a fitting tribute to a man who had touched so many lives without ever seeking recognition. Dr. Elena Carter stood near the back of the group, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt profound gratitude for Harold's courage and selflessness. On the other, she couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just another burial. It was the culmination of months of painstaking preparation, countless sleepless nights, and endless debates about ethics and morality. As she watched the coffin being carried toward the gravesite, Elena reminded herself why they were doing this. They weren't merely conducting an experiment, they were exploring the boundaries of human knowledge, driven by a desire to understand what lies beyond the veil of life. The coffin itself looked unremarkable. From the outside, a simple wooden box adorned with a single wreath of white lilies. But hidden within its polished surface was some of the most advanced technology ever used in such a setting. Inside, nestled discreetly among the lining, was the hidden camera system designed to record everything that happened after Harold's body was laid to rest. Equipped with infrared sensors, high-definition lenses, and long-lasting batteries, the device was built to withstand the harsh conditions underground. Yet despite its sophistication, no one could predict what it might capture, or whether it would capture anything at all. As the ceremony began, a local minister delivered a heartfelt eulogy, speaking of Harold's kindness, generosity, and unwavering optimism. Harold lived his life with purpose, the minister said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. Even in his final days, he sought to leave a legacy of hope and discovery. The words resonated deeply with everyone present, especially the researchers, who knew firsthand how much Harold had given to make this experiment possible. The eulogy. A few attendees stepped forward to share their memories of Harold. One woman recounted how he had encouraged her to pursue science despite struggling in school. Another spoke of the handwritten notes he sent years after graduation, reminding former students that they were capable of achieving great things. Each story painted a picture of a man who believed in the potential of others, even when they doubted themselves. Listening to these tributes, Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. Harold's impact extended far beyond the confines of his classroom. He had inspired countless lives, including hers. Once the speeches concluded, it was time for the coffin to be lowered into the ground. For the researchers, this moment was both surreal and nerve-wracking. Everything they had worked for hinged on what happened next. Would the equipment function as intended? Would the recordings provide any meaningful data? Or would the entire endeavor end in disappointment? Despite their best efforts to prepare for every scenario, there were still too many unknowns. As the coffin descended slowly into the earth, the sound of soil hitting wood echoed through the silent cemetery. It was a haunting reminder of finality, a stark contrast to the hope that fueled the experiment. Elena glanced around at her team, noticing the mix of determination and apprehension etched on their faces. They had poured their hearts into this project, not just as scientists but as human beings searching for answers to age-old questions. Now all they could do was wait. After the burial, the mourners lingered for a while, paying their respects before heading home. The researchers stayed behind, lingering near the freshly dug grave. Though they tried to appear composed, their minds raced with anticipation. What secrets lay beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered? Was it possible that Harold's final act of generosity would unlock mysteries humanity had pondered for centuries? Before leaving the cemetery, Elena knelt beside the grave and whispered softly, "Thank you, Harold. Whatever happens, your bravery will never be forgotten." Her words were met with silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves overhead. As she rose to her feet, she noticed a faint glimmer of sunlight breaking through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the scene. It was as if nature itself was offering a sign of reassurance, a reminder that even in moments of darkness, there is always the possibility of light. Back at the lab, the team wasted no time retrieving the live feed from the hidden camera. The setup allowed them to monitor the recordings remotely, ensuring minimal disturbance to the burial site. Sitting in front of the monitors, they braced themselves for what they might see or not see. Would the footage reveal nothing more than darkness and stillness? Or would it capture something extraordinary, something that defied explanation? For the first few hours, the screen showed exactly what they expected: complete blackness. The absence of light or movement was almost eerie, a stark reminder of the isolation buried beneath layers of soil. Yet, instead of feeling discouraged, the researchers remained hopeful. After all, Harold's journey was just beginning. If their hypothesis held true, the real revelations would come later, when the physical world faded into the background and whatever lay beyond took center stage. As night fell, the team continued their vigil, taking turns monitoring the feed. Tension filled the air, but so did a sense of camaraderie. They shared snacks, traded stories about Harold, and speculated about what the coming days might bring. Though exhaustion crept in, none of them wanted to leave. This was history in the making, and they were determined to witness every moment of it. Unbeknownst to them, the most astonishing discoveries were yet to unfold. Beneath the earth, in the quiet solitude of Harold's final resting place, the hidden camera stood ready to document whatever awaited. Whether it captured evidence of an afterlife, strange phenomena, or simply the passage of time, one thing was certain: Harold's story was far from over. And as the researchers settled in for the long haul, they couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. Whatever lay ahead, they were about to embark on a journey unlike any other. A journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the mysteries that connect us all. The first 24 hours of the experiment passed without incident. The monitors in the lab displayed nothing but an unbroken expanse of darkness, interrupted only by the faint hum of static from the audio feed. For the researchers, this was both expected and frustrating. They had prepared themselves for the possibility that the footage might reveal very little, yet the lack of activity gnawed at their resolve. Still, they reminded each other to be patient. Science often demanded time, especially when venturing into realms as mysterious as death itself. By the second day, however, things began to change in ways no one could have anticipated. Around mid-morning, Dr. Elena Carter noticed something peculiar on the monitor, a faint flicker at the edge of the frame. At first, she dismissed it as a glitch or interference caused by moisture seeping into the coffin. But as she leaned closer, her breath caught in her throat. The flicker wasn't random. It was rhythmic, almost like the gentle sway of shadows moving across the screen. She called over her assistant, Mark, who had been dozing off in his chair after pulling an all-nighter. "Mark, look at this," Elena said, pointing to the monitor. "Do you see that?" Mark rubbed his eyes and squinted at the screen. Is that movement?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. The two of them watched intently as the faint patterns continued, shifting subtly but deliberately. It wasn't just one shadow. It was multiple shapes gliding along the edges of the coffin's interior. The movements were slow and deliberate, almost as if they were exploring the confined space. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be soil settling unevenly? Or was there something else, something far more extraordinary at play? To rule out technical errors, the team ran diagnostics on the equipment. They checked for malfunctions, reviewed the camera's calibration, and even cross-referenced the data with environmental sensors placed near the burial site. Everything appeared to be functioning perfectly. There was no sign of water damage, power fluctuations, or external interference. Whatever was causing the shadows, it wasn't coming from the hardware. As the day wore on, the researchers grew increasingly uneasy. The movements weren't consistent with natural phenomena like earth shifting or roots growing. They seemed purposeful, almost sentient. Some members of the team suggested it might be animals, burrowing creatures drawn to the warmth of the coffin, but that theory didn't hold up either. The shapes were too large, too fluid, and too calculated to belong to rodents or insects. Then came the whispers. It started late in the evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the lab. One of the junior researchers, Priya, was monitoring the audio feed when she heard it, a soft, indistinct murmur emanating from the speakers. At first, she thought it was background noise picked up by the microphone, perhaps wind rustling through grass or distant traffic. But as she adjusted the volume, the sound became clearer. It wasn't random static or ambient noise. It was unmistakably human-like. "Guys, come listen to this," Priya called out, her voice trembling slightly. The entire team gathered around the workstation, straining to hear what she had discovered. The murmurs were faint but undeniable, weaving in and out like overlapping voices in a crowded room. Some sounded male, others female, and they spoke in tones so low they were barely audible. What made it even stranger was that the voices didn't seem to originate from a single direction. Instead, they surrounded the coffin, as if emerging from every corner of the buried chamber. Elena quickly initiated audio enhancement software, isolating and amplifying the sounds. As the program processed the recording, fragments of words began to emerge. Phrases like "it is time" and "he waits" floated eerily through the speakers, sending shivers down everyone's spines. The language was unfamiliar, neither English nor any dialect the researchers recognized. Yet the tone carried a sense of urgency, as though the voices were trying to convey a message meant specifically for Harold. "This can't be real," muttered Mark, shaking his head in disbelief. "It has to be some kind of trick." Maybe the soil composition is messing with the acoustics. But Elena wasn't convinced. She replayed the enhanced audio several times, searching for patterns or explanations. Each playback deepened her unease. The voices weren't distorted or fragmented. They were coherent, deliberate, and chillingly calm. They didn't sound like echoes of the living world above ground. If anything, they felt otherworldly. The team debated late into the night, torn between skepticism and awe. Was this evidence of an afterlife? A glimpse into dimensions beyond human comprehension? Or was it simply their minds playing tricks on them, desperate to find meaning in the unknown? No one dared to voice the most unsettling possibility, that whatever they were witnessing might not be benign. Despite their fears, curiosity outweighed caution. The researchers agreed to continue monitoring the footage round the clock, documenting every detail meticulously. They set up additional systems to analyze the data in real time, hoping to uncover patterns or correlations between the movements and the voices. Meanwhile, Elena reached out to linguists and experts in paranormal phenomena, seeking insights that might shed light on the recordings. Though hesitant to share too much information prematurely, she knew they couldn't tackle this mystery alone. As dawn broke on the third day, fatigue hung heavy over the lab. The researchers looked pale and disheveled, their eyes bloodshot from staring at screens for hours on end. Yet beneath their exhaustion lay a spark of determination. They were standing on the precipice of something monumental, something that could redefine humanity's understanding of life and death. Every shadow, every whisper brought them closer to answers, or perhaps to even bigger questions. For Elena, the experience was deeply personal. She couldn't help but think of Harold lying motionless in the coffin, his body now part of the earth while his spirit, or consciousness, seemed to linger somewhere nearby. Was he aware of the voices surrounding him? Could he hear them calling to him, guiding him toward whatever awaited beyond? These thoughts weighed heavily on her mind, forcing her to confront her own beliefs about mortality. As the team prepared for another long day of observation, a new realization dawned on them. The movements and whispers weren't isolated incidents. They were building toward something. The patterns were becoming more pronounced, the voices clearer and more frequent. It was as if the hidden camera had tapped into a realm previously inaccessible to human perception, revealing truths that defied logic and reason. And then, just as the researchers braced themselves for what might come next, the screen went blank. For a moment, panic rippled through the room. Had the equipment failed? Was the experiment over before they could fully comprehend its implications? But before anyone could react, the monitor flickered back to life, displaying an image so startling that it left them speechless. In that fleeting instant, the boundaries between science and the supernatural blurred, leaving the team grappling with emotions they couldn't articulate. Fear, wonder, and awe collided within them, forcing them to confront the reality that they were no longer merely observers. They were participants in something far greater than themselves. And as the flickering image faded back into darkness, one thing became abundantly clear. Whatever happened next would change their lives forever. The flickering image that appeared on the monitor was brief, lasting only a fraction of a second, but it left an indelible mark on everyone in the lab. At first glance, it seemed like a glitch, a burst of light or interference caused by some unknown factor. But as the researchers replayed the footage frame by frame, they realized it wasn't random noise. The image showed something unmistakable. A luminous tunnel surrounded by swirling colors, vibrant and surreal, stretching endlessly into the distance. It looked almost otherworldly, like nothing any of them had ever seen before. Dr. Elena Carter stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt as though she were peering through a window into another dimension, one that defied the laws of physics and logic. The edges of the tunnel shimmered with hues of gold, blue, and violet pulsating rhythmically as if alive. Standing near its entrance were shadowy figures cloaked in soft, radiant light. Their forms were indistinct, yet they exuded an aura of calmness and purpose. Some raised their arms as if beckoning, while others stood still, watching silently. What "What is this?" whispered Priya, her voice barely audible over the hum of the equipment. No one answered. The team sat frozen, unable to process what they were witnessing. Was this a hallucination? A malfunction of the camera system? Or had they truly captured something beyond human comprehension? The implications were staggering. If the footage was authentic, it suggested that Harold's consciousness, or perhaps his soul, had transcended the physical realm, entering a space that existed outside the boundaries of life as they knew it. Elena broke the silence, her tone measured but tinged with awe. "We need to analyze this further. Run every test we can think of. Check for anomalies, verify the integrity of the recording, and cross-reference it with environmental data." Her words snapped the team out of their stunned stupor, prompting them to spring into action. They worked tirelessly, dissecting every pixel, every sound wave, and every detail of the fleeting image. Yet no matter how many times they reviewed the footage, the conclusion remained the same. There was no logical explanation for what they had seen. As the hours passed, the whispers grew louder and more frequent. The voices, which had initially been faint and fragmented, now filled the audio feed with startling clarity. Phrases like "he is ready" and "come closer" echoed hauntingly through the lab, sending chills down everyone's spines. Some of the researchers began keeping headphones nearby, reluctant to let the sounds play openly for fear of attracting unwanted attention, or worse, triggering something they couldn't control. Despite their growing unease, the team couldn't ignore the significance of what they were uncovering. The combination of visual and auditory phenomena pointed to a singular, undeniable truth. Harold Jenkins' passing had opened a doorway to something extraordinary. Whether it was an afterlife, a parallel dimension, or simply a manifestation of the mind during death, the evidence was impossible to dismiss. Yet, as thrilling as the discoveries were, they also brought a sense of dread. The researchers found themselves questioning not just the nature of the footage but their own roles in the experiment. Had they crossed a line by tampering with forces they didn't fully understand? Were they inviting consequences they weren't prepared to face? These thoughts weighed heavily on Elena, who often stayed late in the lab, staring at the monitors long after the others had gone home. One evening, as she sat alone in the dimly lit room, Elena allowed herself to reflect on everything that had transpired. She thought about Harold, the man whose courage and selflessness had made this experiment possible. He had trusted her and her team implicitly, believing that their work could bring comfort and understanding to countless others. But now, faced with the inexplicable images and sounds coming from the coffin, Elena wondered if she had underestimated the gravity of their endeavor. What if they had disturbed something sacred? What if Harold's peace was being compromised by their intrusion? Her musings were interrupted by a sudden shift in the footage. On the monitor, the swirling colors of the tunnel intensified, glowing brighter than ever before. The shadowy figures moved closer, their outlines becoming slightly clearer. One of them extended a hand toward the camera, its gesture unmistakably welcoming. For a moment, Elena felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to connect with whatever lay beyond the screen. But just as quickly, the image faded, plunging the coffin back into darkness. Shaken, Elena called an emergency meeting with the team. She shared her concerns openly, urging them to consider the ethical implications of continuing the experiment. "We're dealing with something far bigger than ourselves," she said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "If we keep going, we need to do so responsibly. We owe that much to Harold and to humanity." The discussion that followed was intense and emotional. Some argued that stopping now would mean abandoning their mission to uncover the truth about life and death. Others believed that proceeding without caution could have unforeseen consequences, potentially endangering not just the team, but anyone who came into contact with the findings. Ultimately, they reached a compromise. They would continue analyzing the footage but impose strict safeguards to ensure the information remained contained until they fully understood its implications. Over the next few days, the team delved deeper into the recordings, uncovering new layers of complexity. The voices, once cryptic and disjointed, began forming coherent sentences. They spoke of journeys, transitions, and reunions, painting a picture of existence beyond the physical world. One phrase, repeated multiple times, stood out. "Do not fear." Though simple, the words carried profound reassurance, as if the entities behind the voices sought to ease the anxieties of those listening. Meanwhile, the movements inside the coffin became more pronounced. Shadows danced across the screen, sometimes converging into shapes that resembled human forms. These apparitions lingered for seconds at a time before dissolving back into the darkness. It was as if they were trying to communicate, not just with Harold but with the researchers themselves. Despite the mounting evidence, skepticism lingered among some members of the team. Mark, ever the pragmatist, insisted on exploring alternative explanations. What if this is all psychological? He proposed during one heated debate. Maybe we're projecting our own hopes and fears onto the footage because we want it to mean something. Elena acknowledged his point but countered with a question of her own. If that's true, then why are we all seeing the same things? Why are the patterns consistent regardless of who's monitoring the feed? Mark had no answer. The consistency of the phenomena defied rational explanation, leaving even the most hardened skeptics grappling with doubt. As the days turned into weeks, the researchers found themselves transformed by the experience. They had entered the project driven by scientific curiosity, but now they were confronting questions that transcended empirical inquiry. What did it mean to live? To die? To exist beyond the constraints of time and space? Each discovery brought them closer to answers, but also to mysteries far greater than they had imagined. For Elena, the journey was deeply personal. She thought often of Harold, wondering if he was aware of the unfolding events. Had he found peace? Was he part of the luminous world they glimpsed through the camera? These questions haunted her, fueling both her determination and her trepidation. And yet, amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear. The experiment had taken on a life of its own. The hidden camera, buried beneath layers of soil, had become more than a tool. It was a conduit to realms unknown, a bridge between the tangible and the intangible. Whatever lay ahead, the team knew they were standing on the threshold of something monumental. The whispers, the shadows, the luminous tunnel, they were fragments of a puzzle that refused to be ignored. And as they pieced together the clues, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being guided, not just by Harold's spirit but by forces far older and wiser than themselves.